Good morning. Wait, it takes a few seconds for me to see who. Okay, so wait a few minutes here to see who's logged in, who's going to log in. Usually takes, I don't know, it takes the software about 30 seconds or so for it to show me how many of you are here. And if you're here, just put a comment down below so it'll pop up on my screen that you're here. There's a couple of you here now. Okay, I see two. Yeah. Guten Morgen. Guten Morgen. Gonna wait another minute or so. All right. Good deal. Okay, let's just, this is where things, if I get knocked offline, you know what to do, just hang on. I'll be back in about a minute or so. I just have to restart my browser. So this is when it usually happens, when I try to share, and it happened a couple of times, first hour, so let's see what happens. I think it might go better this time. Can look at the vocabble. Tomorrow is a vocabble quiz. Morgen isn't a vocabble quiz. That's going to work. There we go. So look at those words. Bulletin board. Yeah, these are mainly all office-related phrases and words. That is die Pinnwand. And assistant. Close to English, Assistent, der or die Assistentin. Please hold. That's our bonus for tomorrow. Bleiben Sie bitte am Apparat. Bleiben Sie bitte am Apparat. Receiver, the thing you talk into. Receiver. Der Hörer. And to find a job. Find a job. Arbeit finden. There's finden. To find. Arbeit is work. Good. Internship. The actual, not the intern, but the internship is called a Praktikum. Das Praktikum. And office supplies. Das Büromaterial. Hopefully we know the word bureau already. And that's one of the main things about this whole chapter. As I said, the vocabulary is mainly office related or job related. Das Büromaterial. Manager, well, there's a good manager. Big long word, der Geschäftsführer. Der Geschäftsführer, die Geschäftsführerin for female manager. Okay, employee would be der Angestellte or die Angestellte. Applicant, before you get the job. These people here are all waiting for interviews, looks like. Der Bewerber or die Bewerberin. Either one you put on the quiz is fine with me. Contract, you sign a contract. That is that's der Vertrag, V-E-R-T-R-A-G, Vertrag. This one's pretty easy, the way I've changed it. Das Interview, good enough. To leave a message. Eine Nachricht hinterlassen. Nachricht is a message. To hang up. Slam the phone down. Or just lay it down. Auflegen. Auflegen. To be on hold. So we ask somebody to hold. Bleiben Sie bitte am Apparat. And you tell some, oh, ich bin in der Warteschleife. In der Warteschleife sein. Business, just a business in general, or a small business like this here. Das Geschäft. And a firm, this would be a larger company, maybe corporation, and that would be die Firma. Stapler, the Büromaterial, this is one of those things, der Hefter. Resume, back to getting a job, that's called der Lebenslauf. Der Lebenslauf. Appointment, der Termin. I think we had the word in German 1, maybe German 1, I think. Terminkalender, which is an appointment, or like a planner, or appointment book, or something like that. That's a Terminkalender. But der Termin is that one. A job opening, Stellenangebot. This is the plural, don't worry about that, but Stellenangebot. So if you looked in the paper, it would look like this. I don't know if they even still put job openings in the paper, but if they did, this is what it would look like. I think it's all online, or a lot of it is. Profession. It's one of the titles of, there's two words that title this chapter, and one of them is this, der Beruf. Der Beruf. Experience. Die Erfahrung. HR manager. There's the personnel, that people that work at for a company or at a certain location. This is not the word personal, like it says personal chef. Well, thank you. Your personal chef. No, that's not what it is. It's the chief of personnel from a company, like this HR manager. Okay, high salary, low salary. Please note, I'll pick one of the others of these if I use this word. Das hohe Gehalt, high salary. Das niedrige Gehalt, low salary. Recommendation letter is an Empfehlungsschreiben. Paperclip. Büroklammer. Büromaterial. This is Büromaterial. Büroklammer. Wer spricht? Wer spricht? A position or job. Yeah, but the actual job that you're looking for, the actual position, that's called a Stelle, like Stellenangebot. Stelle is a job like that. To answer the phone. This is a strange one, I think. Einen Anruf entgegennehmen. So Anruf we've had before, a call, but entgegennehmen is a new word for us. Only use of calls as far as I know. Professional training. So Berufsausbildung. We had the word Beruf today already. Ausbildung is training or education, and that could be, again, I say it every time, but that could be before you get the job, or that could be while you have the job. They have, they got to train you further. Maybe things change, technology, who knows. So here's the word for education or training, die Ausbildung. Reference, that's an easy one for us speaking English. Die Referenz. To apply is sich bewerben, I think, yeah, I forgot if we put that. This would be to apply for. The part would be where we would say for. So, ich bewerbe mich die Stelle. Ich bewerbe mich die Stelle bei Bosch. Ich bewerbe mich die Stelle bei McDonald's. Okay? Good. Almost at the end. A meeting going on in this picture here is die Besprechung. Besprechung. I think I said yesterday or day before, Tuesday, that the verb besprechen is to discuss something. So sprechen is to speak. Besprechen is to discuss, because usually that entails talking. And then the noun Besprechung is a meeting. Good. Make an appointment. Well, we have the a word for appointment, but the different verb we use there, Termin vereinbaren. So like entgegennehmen, in my experience, entgegennehmen and vereinbaren have kind of definite uses, and I only know this word together with Termin, so some other use for it, but I don't know. But okay. And telephone, this one's easy too. Several of these are pretty close to English. It's the telephone number. So both words, again, double ends and N, we have ends with N, both. It's just these two words pushed together. The telephone number. Okay, let me see if I can do this without changing. I wanted to wait, yeah, good. I wanted to wait until we were together to talk about this, but I'm not going to have that luxury, considering, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I thought we'd be back in school today, to be honest with you, but we either way, tomorrow, or if we're in class or not, we'll have the vocab quiz tomorrow. We'll either do it online or we'll do it in class. So, but let's get into this part. This is the main part of this chapter. The grammar part is this relative pronouns, and I just said a few things about it yesterday. You may not know what a relative pronoun is in English. That's okay. You'll know whenever we get done with this chapter for sure. But if you look at the word relative in the title of this little section, think of the word relate, and that's really important, at least in understanding what this is all about. And you relate to something. You relate back to something that you said earlier. That kind of relate. Not like you can relate to a situation, to someone else is going through. Not like you're related, like a relative, but like a family member. But you're relating back to something you said before, something you mentioned before. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean there's lots of uses for the word relative. Like, relatively speaking, the weather we had the last week is not that cold, relative to how it is in Alaska every winter. Yeah, that's true. Relative. Everything's relative, like weather. All right. Not that one either. Relate back to something that's been mentioned already, or that's maybe understood, that I don't have to mention it again. It's understood in our conversation what it is I'm talking about, maybe. So how do we do that? How do we relate back to something? So in English, we might say, I think I said yesterday, we might use the word which, W-H-I-C-H, or maybe the word that, although using that may not be the best grammar, but this just doesn't matter. That people say it all the time. For our purposes, it doesn't matter. Just what people say is more important. So, which or that, like I might say, or maybe even if it's a person we're referring back to, we might say who, right? In English we do. In English we might say who. So that's the person who told me about this concert, okay? That's the person who told me. Well, who is the who? What's the who? The who is referring back to, is relating, I'll say it that way better, is relating back to the person I mentioned earlier in the sentence. In fact, I mentioned it just before I said who. That's the person who told me about the concert. So it's important in the sentence, but it has a meaning there. But who relates to the person. I might have said earlier something else about this person, like, yeah, this friend of mine is a big concert goer. He never misses any concerts. And then later on I might say, that's the person who told me about this concert. Yeah, maybe later on. So again, it's been mentioned before. You know who I'm talking about. Maybe in the same sentence I've mentioned him. And that's the way that we relate back to it. That makes it a relative pronoun of sorts. Now, in German, they may use, well, let's just stick with what we know. They use the articles der, die, das, den, maybe others too, but we're going to stick with those primarily here. Der, die, das, den. Der, masculine, die could be feminine or plural. Don't forget that. Das, neuter words. Den would be masculine but accusative, so we'll hold off on that one for a minute. Let's just talk about der, die, das. In this example right here, this character, Sabita, I think, says, ist der Künstler. So Kunst is art. Künstler, that might be a new word for Künstler. He's the artist. So here we even use the article here, der. He is the artist. Ist der Künstler. And then before the relative pronoun, you're going to put a comma. And that's maybe not always the rule in English, although I don't know as much about English as I do about German grammar and punctuation. But in German, before you mention the relative pronoun, you're going to put a comma. So it sets apart what we call the main clause from the subordinate clause here. So, okay, so you guys get that? I'm using other words here. And I never want to assume that everyone knows as much grammar as they could or might or should, or I don't know, because I didn't know much about English grammar until I took German. I just kind of blew it off. And then I had a chance to start over again with a new language. So, yeah, I've told you the story. So, in a story, in a more complex sentence, you may have a dependent and an independent clause. And relative pronouns begin, or I say independent and dependent, sometimes dependent are called subordinate clauses, if you're more familiar with that term. I think that's what the book calls them too. But, okay, we can use those interchangeably. Subordinate and dependent makes sense because the independent clause wouldn't be subordinate to the dependent clause. Just think about that logically. So the first four words she says are the independent clause. Ist der Künstler. He's the artist. But now I want to say more about that artist. I want to say something else about... Now, in this... this is actually part of the video for this chapter. She's already told us who the artist is that she's going to refer to later. So it's almost like she's double relating back to it. Just before this, she told us this artist's name, that she admired him, and then she goes on to say more about him. Ist der Künstler, comma, and then they refer back to him with the article der. Because the artist, it's a male artist, it's a guy she's talking about, and so we're going to use the masculine article der to relate back to him. Now in English this is going to come out like this. He's the artist who did something, all right? He's the artist who had an exhibition at Philbrook. He's the artist who painted that famous painting. He's the artist who sculpted this world-famous sculpture out of cheese or ice or whatever they do. Okay, so that's we relate back to der Künstler in German, though, using a masculine article, in this case, der. So this sentence can say, ist der Künstler, der im Central Park in New York, das Kunstwerk, the gates. The Kunstwerk is the the work of art, and he called that work of art the gates. Errichtet hat, and he's the one who set up this work of art called the gates. We'll talk about this artist later, but he does these kind of temporary things like this, and so he set it up, and then it was there for a while, and they take it down. and it never is. It's not there anymore. It doesn't travel around or something. Anyway, long story. But ist der Künstler, der am Central Park in New York das Kunstwerk The Gates errichtet hat. So once we use the relative pronoun der, so we know the word der by different things now. Der means the. In fact, it meant the right here. But in the dependent clause, or the relative clause, you might call it also, I guess, beginning with the relative pronoun, der, here it means who, or maybe which, I don't know. He's the artist which, no, I think who sounds better. He's the artist who set up in Central Park in New York, the artistic work called The Gates. Okay. So, der Künstler, der. This whole longer dependent clause or subordinate clause is referring or relating back to the artist, this word here. Here's another example. Now we don't use the word die Frau, but eine Frau, but it doesn't matter. Frau is still a feminine word. Sie ist eine Frau, comma, die. So, what's this long clause relating back to? Die Frau, or eine Frau. She is a woman who does something, right? Die mit Typen flirtet. Let's just leave it right. Let's put a period right there after flirtet, just to keep this simple sentence. Typen is a bit of a slang word for guys. Although Typen, I think, could, like we say, hey guys, and I might be referring to you guys as a whole class. So we have Sydney here, so that if it just referred to men, that wouldn't work. But Typen, but here though, it's talking about men though. But sie ist eine Frau, like guys can sometimes just refer to men. Die ist eine Frau, die mit Typen flirtet. Well, take a guess what this word means. Flirten, or here flirtet. It's conjugated. Flirtet, yep, to flirt. She's a woman who flirts with guys. Okay, mit Typen flirtet. So, notice this here. This makes it a better sentence than to demonstrate than this one. This has a longer thing going on, but sie ist eine Frau, die mit Typen mit Flirten tupet. Nein, mit Typen flirtet. Notice whenever we use a relative pronoun, and that begins the subordinate clause, that pushes the verb to the end conjugated. We've seen this before, but it pushes with the subordinating conjunctions. But this works. This is a subordinate clause. Does the same thing. Pushes the verb to the end in its conjugated form. Sie ist eine Frau, die mit Typen flirtet. Okay, now let's just stick with this just for a minute and just only treat this as its own sentence, this top line, as a complete sentence, which it could be if it put a period right there instead of a comma. Ja, eine Frau, die mit Typen flirtet. Notice that in the independent clause, there is a subject and a verb. Sie ist. Even though we call it a subordinate clause, the subordinate clause also has a subject and a verb. This is true in English also. But there's a subject and a verb on both sides of the comma. Sie ist, but I want to say more about the woman. And in saying that, I say more about her, but I need a subject and a verb. What takes the place of the subject? Well, mit Typen, no, that's a prepositional phrase, with guys. But this word, die, this is the subject within the subordinate clause. Because die is relating back to eine Frau. So, in a sense, die, or here, der, takes the place of the word Frau. It relates back to it, and it relates back to it in a way that represents the noun Die Frau. So this operates as our subject in the dependent clause. Sie ist eine Frau, die mit Typen flirtet. She is a woman who flirts with guys. Here, ist der Künstler der, and in this big long sentence here, der is the subject of the dependent clause. In the independent clause, we have ist. That's our subject. He is. Then we rename it and say the artist, but the subject is ist. Here we say sie ist, then we rename whatever she is, eine Frau. Sie ist eine Frau. That could be a sentence on its own. But then I want to say more about this woman. Comma, die mit Typen flirtet. So let's look and see what the book says here. I hope that... Okay. Use relative pronouns to combine two statements. That's really well said. I like that. Two statements about the same subject into a single sentence. Read it again. Use relative pronouns to combine two statements about the same subject into a single sentence. So we could have said, ist Künstler, and then period. And then say, it'd be phrased differently, but hat im Central Park in New York das Kunstwerk The Gates errichtet. Period. Two separate sentences. Sie ist eine Frau. Period. Eine Frau, that'd be a little harder to say. Let's say, sie ist eine Frau und die Frau flirtet mit Typen. No, that's not so hard to say. That sounds kind of weird. She's a woman. A woman, and the woman I'm talking about flirts with men. He is an artist. He constructed this work, The Gates, in Central Park in New York. Yeah, it sounds kind of like kindergartenish a little bit, or maybe the way that, and it's easier that way. But I mean, in German too, just to make two separate sentences. But what we can do with a relative pronoun is that's a great, I'm sorry, I know I've read this before, probably a dozen times, but I just like the way that's worded. Both sides of the comma are using the same subject. I like that, that's good. So, sie and die. There should be a correlation here. And der. Right? These relate to each other, literally. They're relative pronouns with these pronouns. Sie, the pronoun, and die, the relative pronoun. But sie and die go together, right? This is feminine she, and this is the feminine article die. Masculine article, masculine pronoun, der, masculine article. Good. So this chart here, especially the first two lines I'm going to focus on. I see there's going to be 4 lines here. Don't worry about all that. Let's just worry about the top 2 lines. Der, die, das. This is in our room. This is something that we had in the first chapter, I think the first chapter of book 1 2 years ago. And I talk about it all the time. Nominative and accusative. We have dative, also genitive. I don't think we've gotten to. But here we are. So the relative pronouns that I'm talking about right now are identical to the articles. Der, die, das, die, plural. Die stays die. Die stays die here. Das stays das here. Der changes to den. I don't know. We'll maybe get to that today. There's a chance we might use the accusative in our relative clause or subordinate clause to begin a subordinate clause, maybe. So, okay. So German relative pronouns correspond to, or they can maybe be translated as who, whom, whose, which would actually be this lower, this genitive thing down here. That would be whose. So we're not going to get to that so much. That and which. So that's what I started off saying. Who, that, or which. It could be whom, if it's used maybe for the word den, that possibly could be used, but mainly who, that, and which. Whose we won't deal with, although it could be that. Those are all relative pronouns in English, but in German, it's almost all of it's just the basic articles that are on the chart. These are some new words down here. There's a new word here, but let's not worry about that. Let's just talk about combining two sentences using the subject in both. So this says here, ich arbeite. These are two sentences. Ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma. So tomorrow we have the vocab quiz. The gender of Firma, hopefully we know, is die Firma. Now, it's not telling us that. I mean, it's not giving us the word die, because it just so happens in this sentence that there's a dative case preposition, and that changes it to the dative case, but doesn't change the gender of the word. It's still die Firma. So this is where it becomes important. Got to know the gender of the word, and then we're going to have to pretty soon know what case it's being used in. But let's hold off on that for a minute. You know, the gender of the word. So even though we're not seeing, like here we got to see a hint. Ist der Künstler der. See, it's eine, that gives us a hint. Yeah, that's a feminine word. Eine Frau die. But here though, it is die Firma, but here in the dependent or independent clause, it's used in the dative case cause of the preposition bei. Ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma. That could be a sentence on its own. I work at a small company. What if I want to say more about this company? Like what kind of business they're in? Well, I can make a separate sentence. Ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma. Period. Die Firma verkauft Möbel. Now think about it, someone said that to you. Wouldn't sound maybe all that weird, but I work at a small company. The company sells furniture. I don't know why, it does sound a little bit weird. Ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma. Die Firma verkauft Möbel. Yeah, okay. Here is the combined. So we're going to use, they're both going to have the same subject. In this case, ich arbeite bei die Firma, and then as I begin the next sentence, I said die Firma. Here, combined together, ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma, comma, die, referring or relating back to die Firma, die Möbel verkauft. Die Möbel, and sells. So again, in English, this is a thing. That's not a person like an artist or this woman above, but I work at a small company which sells furniture, or that sells furniture. I'm not sure which one sounds better, but or worse, but that's the way we'd express that. Ich arbeite bei einer kleinen Firma, die Möbel verkauft. I work for a small company that sells furniture. So separate a relative clause from the main clause with a comma, and put the conjugated verb at the end. That's what we did here. We put verkauft at the end. Here's our subject. Like I said, there's going to be a subject and verb on both sides. Ich arbeite. Die, referring to die Firma. Die, and at the end of the subordinate, verkauft. Separate each relative clause from the main clause with a comma, the main clause being the independent one. I wish they would use more consistent language, grammatical language here. They just call it a relative clause here. Up here they called it a dependent or subordinate clause. These are all the same thing, I guess, but it's a bit confusing, I think. The conjugated verb at the end. As in English, a relative clause may come in the middle of a sentence or in the middle of a main clause. In that case, you put commas after, before and after to set it apart from the whole sentence. Let's say, let's use this example over here. Die Personalchefin, comma. So I haven't had a verb yet. because this is going to come in the middle of my sentence. There is a verb after the comma's end. Here, war. This could be a sentence. Die Personalchefin, skip over this part, war sehr nett. The HR manager, skip over here, was very nice. But in English, we're going to try to say, the HR manager who took my call, no commas. Okay, that's English. The HR manager who took my call was very nice. Here's the who took my call is the relative clause or the subordinate clause. Die Personalchefin, die meinen Anruf entgegengenommen hat. There's our word, Anruf entgegennehmen, but that's the past participle. So there's our comma, and then close the comma. Here we'll say close the comma, open the comma, close the comma, like quotes. War sehr nett. Okay, so we have a subject and a verb in die Personalchefin war sehr nett, and we have the article die being the subject of the relative clause, relating back to der Personalchefin, and a verb, entgegengenommen hat. Yeah, I have actually a helping verb with this one. Okay, here, wer hat den Hefter genommen? Who took my stapler, or the stapler? But here, it uses a direct object. Wer hat den Hefter? But now we want to relate back to the noun der Hefter, der auf meinen Schreibtisch stand. Who's taken the stapler which was on my desk? Or that, I think at. That sounds better. Who took the stapler? Well, that's got a subject and verb. Even got a direct object. That refers back to the stapler. The stapler was on my desk. Put those together. Who took the stapler that was on my desk? Has a more fluent sound and feel to it. Wer hat den Hefter genommen, der auf meinen Schreibtisch stand? And here we kind of break this definition that I liked above. Here that says relative pronouns to combine two statements about the same subject into a single sentence. Okay, about the same subject. This doesn't mean subject like the subject of the sentence. It means the subject, like the topic of the sentence. It might have been a better way to word this here. The topic. Because here, when we talk about the stapler, who has look, this is obviously in the accusative case, which means it's a DO probably. Who has taken the stapler? Who is really the subject here, and has taken, I just don't know who it is, but here's the direct object, but the subject, as in the topic, is the same in the relative clause. The stapler, which was on my desk, or was on my desk. So that's a bit tricky. I should have pointed that. Doesn't mean subject like grammatically, although it could be, because up here it's the subject and it's also er. That's the subject of that independent clause, and der, and z and d. That's actually grammatically the subject as well as the topic. The woman's the topic here, and the artist is the topic here. Here, though, what it really means is the subject meaning the topic. So that's why we can have it be a direct object or accusative case, but then pop back up over here again in the as the subject of the dependent clause. Over here, I'm just talking about, saying more about the HR manager. Maybe there's more than one who took my call. Okay, good. That's relative pronouns, and when we get to there's a time we're going to use den, but I'll get to that when we get to it. Let me see here what I think. Yeah, this just has more, and I'm not going to go too far into a lot of this. I'm going to keep it simple for a little bit, because it's only really have this one grammatical thing to deal with in this chapter. And if we get into I'm going to hold off on the dative case and all that, and genitive we won't really do at all, but because we haven't really talked about genitive case. But So the first three levels of that chart on page 118. And this, I'll talk a little bit, alles etwas nichts. There's examples where you have a relative pronoun or relative clauses talking about everything, something, nothing, a lot, little. You might do that way. Okay, so but there's quite a bit of this page we're not gonna do because I think the book actually kind of gets ahead of itself here a little bit. All right, so I was going to, but I went kind of long on this. I think I might hold off on this. I was going to share with you this worksheet, but I think I might hold off on that till tomorrow, probably tomorrow, where you just fill the blank in with the proper relative pronouns. So the answers are going to be der, die, das, and maybe den in some cases, and I've made the worksheet about work-related stuff. So, well, almost all of it here. Ich esse die Schokolade. Well, that's not about work. Wir trinken den Wein. That's not work. The last two are not work-related. Or maybe the last three. Okay. Okay. I know it's a little bit early, but I'm going to stop. Feel like I'm losing my voice. Oh, man. So I'm going to stop there and maybe recharge the voice batteries a little bit. So please be sure and look at the vocabulary. Be sure and be ready for the quiz tomorrow, whether we're at home or in person. I'm hoping again we're in person, but who knows. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Und ich sage auf Wiedersehen und bis morgen. Ne? Ciao, tschüss, auf Wiedersehen.